Alright, so with his win over Felipe Lima at UFC 317, Payton Talbott has officially beat the fraud allegations, going from one of the most hyped prospects in the sport at one point to someone basically everyone had forgotten about, all because he supposedly got fraud checked by Raoni Barcelos at UFC 311. But when you look back at it, not only did he not really get fraud checked, it's arguably not even a bad loss to have. Now, as most of you probably know, most of Payton Talbott's hype came after he KO'd Cameron Saaiman, with some of the fanbase even calling him the real O'Malley. But coming off a win on the Contender Series, Payton Talbott made his UFC debut against Nick. I'm not going to say the rest of his name, but Payton Talbott came in as a minus 700 favorite. But in the first round, Aguiar completely dominated him in the grappling, having nearly 5 minutes of control time. However, in the second and third rounds, Payton Talbott just completely broke him down, beating him up with the ground and pound before eventually getting the sub. It wasn't the worst performance ever, but it does confuse me how the odds makers could have seen that fight and still made Payton Talbott a minus 1,000 favorite against Raoni Barcelos, despite his clear inexperience in the grappling. His next fight came against another good prospect, Cameron Saaiman, in which he absolutely dominated him.
Итак, раунд под номером 2. Хорош, вот это было мощно, и тут же добивание следует.
This ended up getting him a lot of hype, catching the attention of a lot of the hardcore fans, and even the UFC, because after 2 straight fights in the Apex, his next fight was on the International Fight Week card, in which he KO'd his opponent in 19 seconds.
By the time I was done, I immediately called.
Now, I think it's pretty clear why they invested so much in Payton Talbott. They didn't just put him on International Fight Week just because it happened to be Pride Month. He was a slick striker, had highlight reel KOs, and also he's just a pretty unique guy. I mean, you just look at him, not only is he zesty, but his hair is different, he has painted nails, and then he has this sick tattoo with that black hole in his chest, and then he makes those weird videos. The guy's just a weird character in general. I think it's pretty clear what the UFC saw in him.
This is why I keep saying, young O'Malley. This is O'Malley 2.0, or we should say it. We should start honestly saying O'Malley is an old school Talbot. O'Malley's an old school Talbot, and the real Sean O'Malley. Rise up! The real O'Malley is back!
If you've been enjoying the video so far, I'd appreciate if you drop me a sub. It would help me out a ton. I'm aiming to hit 1,000 subs by the end of the year. Anyway, thank you to anybody who does subscribe. And let's get back into the video. Now, Payton Talbott, as we know, was going into this fight with a lot of hype behind him, being heavily pushed by the UFC, especially after his knockout over Yanis Gamora. He was going into this fight against Raoni Barcelos as a minus 1,000 favorite, which in hindsight, that doesn't make any sense. Those odds seem to be basically purely based on hype, especially when you look at the grappling disadvantage that I mentioned earlier. But a lot of people were counting Raoni Barcelos out. There was a few fans saying that this was Talbott's toughest matchup yet, and that Raoni was going to give him some problems. But a lot of the fans, the UFC and the odds makers, were kind of just looking at this fight kind of like a layup for Payton Talbott, like a prospect fighting some old guy, similar to Jacoby Smith versus Nico Price. Now, there was somewhat of a good reason for this. Raoni Barcelos is like 38 years old right now, and going into the Talbott fight, he was 1-2 in his last 3, and he was insanely inactive. So I do understand why Payton Talbott was the favorite, but like I've said, there was no reason for him to be a minus 1,000 favorite. I mean, you could argue that he shouldn't even have been the favorite in the first place. Raoni Barcelos is an extremely skilled grappler with impressive credentials in both jiu-jitsu and wrestling. He has a lot of wins in the UFC, even beating Said Nurmagomedov, which is an incredibly underrated win. And even though he has a couple losses, his more recent ones were actually not that bad, losing to Kyler Phillips and Umar, who are both ranked right now. So looking back, it isn't that surprising that Raoni was able to beat Payton Talbott, but then the actual fight happened. I lost. Payton Talbott got absolutely mauled and dominated on the ground. I'm sure he enjoyed it a bit, but he ended up losing a 30-26, which is pretty bad. But I do think that his loss was overblown a bit, because although he got 30-26, he took almost no damage in that fight at all, basically getting outskilled on the ground by a guy like Raoni Barcelos, who is an incredible grappler. Like, I really don't consider that a fraud check. Like, when you look at Austin Lane versus Robelis de Spain, Austin Lane is not like a good grappler, and he was able to dominate Robelis de Spain on the ground. That is a fraud check. But Payton Talbott going against an elite level grappler and not being able to out grapple him just isn't a fraud check. He didn't get submitted, he didn't take any damage, like he just lost to someone who is better than him. This is like saying that Umar got fraud checked by Marab. A lot of people nowadays kind of just consider you out of your prime and fraud check the moment you lose, even though that makes no sense. Like, losing to someone who is just better than you doesn't mean that you're washed or out of your prime. It just means you're not at that level. It's like people forget that some of the best fighters in the sport have lost before they got the belt. Like, how many times did Charles lose? I'm not saying Payton Talbott is ever going to be on that level, but I think it's kind of ridiculous to call him a fraud just because he lost one time, especially when it was to someone as good as Raoni Barcelos. But still, after his loss at UFC 311, he had basically everyone in MMA calling him a fraud. There was some people defending him, but there was also a lot of people who weren't.
It's okay. It's okay. Western society is moving in a positive direction where all of our men are frail little weaklings, bro. Keep it up. Progression. We're being progressive over here until all our men can't fucking fight. Fuck, man. Payton Talbott got fucking fraud checked. By Barcelos! I knew he would, but not Barcelos.
Now, Payton Talbott's next fight would be against Felipe Lima, another very hyped up prospect, and Payton Talbott was being very overlooked going into this fight, coming in as a plus 140 underdog, but mostly being overlooked by the fans, with only 33% of people picking him on Tapology. And as you can see, I picked Payton Talbott by decision, which just proves I am the greatest analyst on MMA YouTube. But Felipe Lima was a very highly regarded prospect going into this, with him having submitted Mohamed Naimov. He's proved he has good wrestling, good jiu-jitsu, and decent striking, although his striking was being heavily overrated going into the fight. Obviously, his striking did look pretty good inside the Payton Talbott fight, but before that, this guy was like very one-dimensional, going to war with like Miles Johns, which is why I ended up picking Payton Talbott. But the fight ended up going completely different to how anybody expected it to, with Payton Talbott clearly having worked on the grappling so much, to the point he was literally out-grappling Felipe Lima, and Felipe Lima was the one out-striking him, although I don't even know if you can really say that, because although it looked that way, Felipe Lima seemed absolutely terrified of Payton Talbott for some reason.
Very interesting in the corner of Felipe Lima. They were telling him, be confident in your stand-up, and he was saying something about Payton Talbott's power.
Like, bro was talking about Payton Talbott like he was like Kratos. But Payton Talbott ended up winning a 29-28 decision. Although this win is not going to restore all of his hype, it's definitely gained him a lot of respect. Not only did he beat a really good prospect in Felipe Lima, he showed major improvements in his grappling, which just shows this guy is a good fighter and does actually have a lot of potential since he got that good at grappling in such a short amount of time. But overall, I do think that that win over Felipe Lima just proved how dumb the whole fraud check thing was in the first place. Now, going forward, I think that Payton Talbott is in a bit of a weird position because, like I said at the start of the video, he's gone from one of the most hyped up prospects in the UFC, maybe even in UFC history, to basically a nobody. Obviously not literally a nobody, but I do not see any hype around his name anymore. In a way, I do think that he's a bit of a victim of his own success, simply because he was being pushed so much and had so much hype around his name that I did kind of feel like the moment he lost, it was just all over. Because it's so shocking to see a guy who's a minus 1,000 favorite lose, especially in the way that he did as well. Whereas you take Felipe Lima losing to Payton Talbott, even though he's another great prospect, he's not being pushed out nearly as much as Payton Talbott. So now that he's lost, I don't think that the fans are going to look at him any differently or give him any backlash either. But that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'm sure there's going to be some people telling me that I'm glazing Payton Talbott. Like in my last video on Arman, I had so many people telling me I was glazing Arman and that I was an Arman fanboy just because I wasn't hating on him. I'm not even a big Arman fan. I was just saying he should stop getting disrespected so much. But that video went crazy and ended up being my biggest video ever, which I am very grateful about. But hopefully people don't call me a Payton Talbott fanboy. Anyway, follow my Instagram, join my Tapology, and yeah, that's going to be it. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe. Alright.
I hop in my car, I pull out the light, I go take a drive on an open road. I think about the things that I want to say and what I really want her to know. I don't want to be too direct and tell her that I love you, but I know I do. Might tell her, baby, I got 2 concert tickets just for me and you, but it's really up to you. I can act like I don't care if you turn me down, but I know I really do. So can I go with you?